Hello, it's Elena, and today I'll be discussing lead exposure risk and how this toxic metal continues to harm communities, why it's a sustainability issue, and how excluded communities or neighborhoods have been disproportionately affected. Now, let me introduce the issue. According to the United States Environmental Protection Agency, lead is a toxic metal that is harmful if inhaled or swallowed and can pose serious health risks. And this is especially true for young children and pregnant women. The EPA explains that most lead people are exposed to come from human activities, specifically the historical use of lead gasoline, lead-based paint in older homes and schools, and from industrial facilities. Here's what makes it a sustainability issue. The EPA states that lead lingers in the environment and does not break down or disappear from the environment over time. Basically, that means lead from gasoline used like 50 years ago is still in our soil today. The EPA also makes a critical point that there is no safe level of lead in children that has been identified. Lead exposure causes permanent damage to children's brains, nervous systems. It also passes from pregnant mothers to their fetuses because lead is stored in the bones and is released during pregnancy. So, lead never breaks down, harms vulnerable populations, and creates generational health costs. This is fundamentally a long-term sustainability and an environmentally justice issue. So, how did human activity create this problem? As I just mentioned, most lead that people are exposed to comes from human activities. And let me break down the three main sources the EPA identifies. First, the historical use of lead gasoline. For decades, lead was added to gasoline, and when cars burned the fuel, lead was released into the air. The EPA explains that this lead then settled into the soil all across the country, especially near roadways. Second, lead-based paint in older homes and buildings. The EPA specifically mentions homes, child care facilities, and schools that were built before 1978. When that paint chips or turns into dust over time, children can inhale it or swallow without anyone even realizing. Third, the release of lead from industrial facilities. The EPA points to smelters and other industrial operations that release lead into the surrounding air and soil. The EPA also notes that certain jobs can expose workers to lead, including renovation, construction, smelting, mining, and auto repair. Even hobbies like making stained glass, fishing, or using lead ammunition can be a source of lead exposure. Now let's talk about the impacts on resource use and long-term sustainability. A 2024 study led by researcher Gabriel Filippelli of Indiana University reveals just how huge this problem is. According to Gabriel Filippelli, one in four U.S. households have soil lead levels exceeding the new EPA guidelines of 200 parts per million. That's roughly 29 million households. And for homes with multiple sources of lead exposure, the EPA sets an even stricter guideline of 100 parts per million. Under that standard, nearly 40% of households are affected, or about 50 million homes. Here's where resource comes in. The traditional method of cleaning up lead-contaminated soil is called dig and dump, which is literally digging up the contaminated soil and hauling it away. The study calculated that using this method for all affected households would cost between $290 billion and $1.2 trillion. That's an enormous strain on our public resources. However, the study also highlights a cheaper, faster alternative called capping. This means burying the contaminated soil with about 12 inches of clean soil or a mulch. Most lead contamination is on the top 10 to 12 inches of soil. So this effectively covers the problem. And the cost is much lower, and crucially, it can be done much quicker, literally in a single weekend. Now, let's talk about excluded communities. According to Maya Shev, a community science organizer of the Orange County Environmental Justice, an environmental justice community is defined as a community mainly consisting of low income, or BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, making them more at risk to environmental hazards than higher income white communities. Santa Ana, California is one such community that has specifically primarily Latin population. Through a soil lead campaign, OCEJ and UCI Public Health sampled over 1,500 locations across Santa Ana. And here's what they found. According to the source, 811 out of 1,555 samples tested unsafe for children, which was over 50% of the samples. The highest lead levels were in downtown and central Santa Ana. The groups most at risk, according to the research, are people of color, residents with lower income, renters, residents without health insurance, immigrants, and those limited with limited English proficiency, and Latin residents. Now, let me wrap up by talking about solutions and future outlook. The good news is that lead poisoning is solvable. We know where the lead is, we know how to fix it, and the only question is whether we are willing to act. First, at home. Families can take simple steps starting today. Get your children tested for lead at 12 and 14 months and cover any bare soil in your yard with grass, mulch, or clean soil, which is called capping like I mentioned earlier. Second, at the community level, local governments can do even more than just us. They can offer free lead testing for families without health insurance, and they can replace old lead pipes in older neighborhoods. Finally, the bottom line. Lead is in the soil because of the choices humans made. We chose to put the lead in gasoline, we chose to put lead in paint, and we chose to put lead in pipes. That means we can also choose to remove it. We can choose to protect our children, choose to invest in communities that have been left behind. The science is clear, the solutions exist, now we just need to act. Thank you. We're excited.